Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy this content, please consider commenting what you liked and what could be improved upon. Now, on to our story. The secret in the margins. I watch him from the back of the lecture hall, my fingers absently tracing the edge of my notebook. Professor Whitmore moves with a quiet confidence, his voice warm and measured as he dissects Wuthering Heights for the 100th time. He's in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, just enough years between us to make my stomach twist with something like guilt. But I can't help it. The way he pauses before answering a question, like every word matters. The way his gaze lingers just a second too long when I speak in class, as if my thoughts are worth more than the others. It's stupid, reckless, cliché, even, but I imagine it anyway, staying after lecture under the pretense of discussing my paper, the empty classroom shrinking around us until there's nothing but the weight of all the things we don't say. Then my phone buzzes in my bag. A text from Daniel, "Dinner tonight?" Guilt knots in my chest. Daniel is sweet, steady, good, everything I should want. But when he kisses me, I close my eyes and pretend his hands are rougher, his voice deeper, his words laced with the kind of quiet intensity that only comes from years of living. Professor Whitmore glances up from his notes, catching my stare. I look down quickly, my face burning. He can't know. No one can know. Because even if he were to look at me that way, even if, by some miracle, he felt the same, what then? I'm his student. He's my professor. There are rules, consequences, a whole life he's built without me in it. But when he reads my essay aloud to the class, now this is a compelling interpretation, his voice wraps around me like an embrace, and for just a moment, I let myself pretend. Dinner with Daniel is pasta and red wine at our usual corner table, the dim glow of the restaurant casting soft shadows across his face. He's talking about his day, something about a project at work, but my mind drifts, pulled back to the way Professor Whitmore had lingered after class, adjusting his glasses as he scribbled notes in the margins of my paper. "You have a unique perspective," he'd said, his fingers brushing mine as he handed it back. "Don't be afraid to take risks with your writing." A shiver had raced up my spine. "Hey!" Daniel's voice snaps me back. He tilts his head, studying me. "You okay? You've been quiet." I force a smile, twirling my fork in the spaghetti. "Just tired. Midterms." He nods, but his eyes linger a beat too long, like he knows there's more. I take a sip of wine, willing myself to focus, on him, on us, but all I can think about is the low timbre of Professor Whitmore's laugh, the way his shirts always look just slightly rumpled, as if he's too consumed by thoughts of Keats and Bronte to bother with ironing. Later, in Daniel's bed, his hands move over me with familiar ease. I close my eyes, and suddenly, it's not his touch I feel, it's the imagined weight of someone else's gaze, the phantom scrape of stubble against my neck. My breath hitches, my body responding with a fervor that surprises even me. Daniel notices. Of course he does. "You're really into tonight," he murmurs against my skin, his voice thick with satisfaction. I don't answer. I just pull him closer, letting the fantasy carry me away. Afterward, as he drifts off beside me, I stare at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the plaster like the lines of a poem I can't quite decipher. And when I finally sleep, it's not Daniel's name on my lips. The graduation gown itches against my skin, the weight of the cap unfamiliar on my head. Around me, my classmates cheer, tossing their tassels and hugging their families. Daniel's arm is tight around my waist, his smile proud, oblivious. "I can't believe we made it," he says, pressing a kiss to my temple. I nod, forcing a laugh. "Yeah. Can't believe it." But my eyes scan the crowd, searching for him. Professor Whitmore stands near the faculty section, hands in his pockets, watching the celebration with that quiet, thoughtful expression I've memorized. He's in his usual tweed jacket, even in the late spring heat, always just a little out of place, a little untouchable. This is the last day. After this, I won't be his student anymore. After this, speaking to him won't be forbidden, just unlikely. Improbable. A little sad. Daniel squeezed my hand. You okay? You're spacing out again. Just taking it all in, I lied. Because how do I explain that for the past few months, every time he's touched me, I've closed my eyes and imagined someone else? That the passion he thinks is for him is just borrowed, stolen from a fantasy that's grown too big to contain? I should be happy. Daniel is happy. He thinks we're stronger than ever. But the truth is, I've been living in two worlds, one where I'm the devoted girlfriend, and another where I'm the woman who lingers after class, who writes just a little too well, just to see the way Professor Whitmore's eyes light up when he reads my words. What if I walked over there right now? The thought is reckless, electric. I could pull him aside, just for a moment. I could tell him, what? That I've spent a year dreaming about him? That I've rewritten every love poem in my head with him in it? Would he step back, horrified? Or would he look at me the way he does when I say something clever in class, like I'm the only person in the room who understands? But even if he did feel the same, what then? He's still older. Still my professor, even if just technically. There would be whispers, judgment, the weight of reality crushing the delicate fantasy I built. Would the real thing ever compare? Daniel tugs me toward the stage, grinning. Come on, they're calling your name. I take a deep breath, stepping forward. And just before I turn away, I catch Professor Whitmore's gaze. He smiles, small, private, just for me. Goodbye, it says. Good luck. I smile back. Then I walk away. The email from my publisher glows on my laptop screen, tour dates confirmed. My finger hovers over the list, heart pounding, until I see it, the Willow and Quill, 2 p.m., October 12th. My old college town. His town. I click away, cheeks burning. It's ridiculous, this flutter in my chest. 5 years have passed since graduation. Daniel and I ended quietly, without drama, just two people who realized, over time, that love shouldn't feel like settling. No fights, no broken promises. Just a mutual understanding that we'd been holding each other back in ways we couldn't name. And now, here I am. A real writer. A published one. I run my thumb over the acknowledgements page of my advance copy, to Professor E. Whitmore, who taught me that the best stories are the ones we're afraid to tell. Safe. Professional. But my mind races with unsafe, unprofessional thoughts. What if he walks into the bookstore that day? What if he's standing in the back, arms crossed, that same half-smile on his face? What if he picks up a copy, flips to that page, and knows? I slam the book shut. This is pathetic. He probably doesn't even remember me. I was one of hundreds of students, just another wide-eyed English major hanging on his every word. And even if he does remember, what would I say? Hey, remember how I spent senior year fantasizing about you? Well, here's a novel about it. Care to grab coffee and compare fiction to reality? I groan, flopping back onto my bed. Still. The fantasy plays out anyway, because some dreams, no matter how foolish, refuse to die. I imagine him leaning against the shelves, watching me read aloud. The way his gaze would catch mine when I mention him in my speech. The way he might linger after the crowd disperses, fingers brushing as he hands me a pen. You kept writing, he'd say. You inspired me, I'd reply. And then? My phone buzzes. My publicist, we've got a great crowd lined up for Willow and Quill. Local papers covering it too. I exhale, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes. It won't happen. It can't. But as I pack my bags for the tour, I slip in the silk blouse he once complimented during a conference. Just in case. My hand ached, the sharp A nearly slipping from my fingers as I reached for the last book. The shop had been packed, more people than I'd expected, their questions endless, their enthusiasm both flattering and exhausting. The event was supposed to end an hour ago, but the line had stretched to the door, and now, as the store quieted, I barely had the energy to lift my head. A worn copy of my novel slid across the signing table, its pages slightly creased, as if it had been read more than once. The man in front of me wore faded jeans and a plain black t-shirt, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. I didn't look up, not at first. But then I caught it. The scent of old paper and ink, that faint trace of sandalwood cologne, subtle, but unmistakable. My breath hitched. My fingers froze mid-signature. No. It couldn't be. I forced myself to glance up, my voice steady despite the way my pulse roared in my ears. Who should I make it out to? His lips quirked, just slightly, in that familiar, knowing way. Edwin Whitmore, please. Oh God. The sound of his first name on my tongue, Edwin, felt forbidden, electric. My hands trembled as I opened the book to the title page, my signature suddenly clumsy. I could feel his gaze on me, warm and heavy, just like it had been all those years ago in the back of his lecture hall. I swallowed hard, scribbling something, anything, before snapping the book shut and handing it back. Our fingers brushed. A spark. A jolt. You came, I whispered, like an idiot. His smile deepened. I read the acknowledgements. A beat of silence. The air between us thickened. Then, softly, you left out the part where I was the reason you nearly failed your final exam in Victorian Lit. A startled laugh escaped me. I didn't nearly fail. You absolutely did. He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. Too busy staring at me to pay attention to the test. My face burned. That's true? He arched a brow. I noticed. The world narrowed to just us, the weight of everything unsaid, every stolen glance, every fantasy I'd ever scribbled in the margins of my notebooks. So, he murmured, picking up the signed book, does the author have time for a drink with an old professor? I should have hesitated. Should have remembered professionalism, the years between us, the fact that this was real now, not just a daydream. But when I met his eyes, really met them, all I saw was the same quiet intensity that had haunted me for years. Yes, I breathed. And just like that, the fantasy stepped off the page. The cafe was quiet, tucked away from the bustle of campus, the kind of place I'd never dared enter as a student, too intimate, too revealing. But now, across the small wooden table, Edwin Whitmore stirred his coffee with deliberate slowness, the steam curling between us like a question. We talked for hours. About my book, about his research, about the way time had reshaped us both without ever really changing the core of who we were. He was sharper now, more weathered, his laugh lines deeper, his hair threaded with silver I didn't remember. But his gaze was the same, steady, knowing, like he could see every unspoken word trembling on my lips. So, he said, setting down his spoon, Daniel. I nearly choked on my tea. What about him? You mentioned things ended. Awkwardly. His mouth twitched. Very, very awkwardly. I groaned. I was trying to be casual. You failed spectacularly. He leaned back in his chair, grinning. But don't worry. I've spent years grading terrible attempts at subtlety. Yours was at least charming. High praise, I deadpanned, but my face burned. He chuckled, then sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. For the record, I'm still unattached. And likely to stay that way. A wry shrug. Turns out, spending your life obsessing over dead poets doesn't make you prime relationship material. I bit my lip. I doubt that's true. Oh, it is. His eyes flicked to mine. But I've made my peace with it. The unspoken until now hung between us, heavy and sweet. Too soon, the cafe lights dimmed, signaling closing time. My stomach sank. My flight was early, the next city waiting, the tour stretching ahead like a road I suddenly didn't want to walk. Edwin, I hesitated, twisting my napkin. Could we keep in touch? His exhale was sharp, almost relieved. God, yes. He pulled out a pen, scribbling on a napkin, not his office number, not his university email, but his personal cell, his handwriting as familiar as the margin notes he'd once left on my essays. I was hoping you'd ask. When we stepped outside, the night air was cool, the street lamps casting long shadows. He turned to me, and for a heartbeat, I thought he might kiss me, really kiss me, but instead, he cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone before pressing his lips to the other cheek. The stubble burned, just like I'd imagined. But it wasn't enough. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark, his voice rough. "When the tour's over." "Yes," I breathed. No more words. Just a promise, a pull, the first real page of a story we'd been writing for years. Then I turned and walked away, toward the hotel, toward the next city, toward the life I'd built without him. But this time I knew the ending wouldn't be just a fantasy. The ticket in my hand was warm from my grip, the edges slightly crumpled from how many times I'd unfolded and refolded over the past week. Final destination, Willow Creek. My throat tightened as the boarding announcement crackled overhead. The last 2 months had been agony. Texts that started as casual, "How was the reading in Chicago? Did you see the review in the Times?" morphed into something deeper, more dangerous. Late night calls where his voice, low and rough with sleep, curled through me like smoke. Video chats where he'd lounge in that faded gray t-shirt, the one that clung just enough to remind me of the body beneath, while I pretended not to notice the way his gaze lingered on the strap of my tank top slipping off my shoulder. We were careful. We were good. But God, we weren't innocent. Every word was a tease, a promise, a game we'd both agreed to play without ever saying the rules aloud. "You should get some rest," he'd murmur, watching me bite my lip. "Big day tomorrow." And I'd laugh, breathless, dragging my nails idly over my collarbone just to see his jaw clench. "I'm not tired." Now, as the plane rumbled down the runway, my legs trembled. What if it wasn't the same in person? What if the years of fantasy had built him into something no real man could live up to? What if? My phone buzzed. A text. "Edwin, landing soon?" A second later, a photo followed, his kitchen table, set for two, a bottle of wine between the plates. The caption, debating whether to cook or order in. Thoughts? I swallowed hard, my thumbs flying. Starving. But not for food. The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Edwin, then hurry up." The plane lifted into the clouds. Outside the window, the world blurred. I didn't know what came next. If we'd crash and burn or rewrite every story I'd ever dreamed about him. If the reality of his hands, his mouth, his body would feel as good as I'd imagined. But I was done wondering. Done waiting. The fantasy had its time. Now it was ours. The air in the bridal suite is thick with the scent of hairspray and gardenias. I sit perfectly still as the stylist pins the last curl into place, her fingers deft and sure. In the mirror, a stranger stares back at me, radiant, glowing, her lips trembling just slightly beneath a veil of satin and lace. 5 years. It feels like a lifetime and a heartbeat all at once. The fantasy I once spun in the margins of my notebooks is now etched into every corner of my life, in the way Edwin's laughter rumbles against my back when he pulls me close in the morning, in the ink-stained notes he still leaves on my drafts, brilliant, but tighten this paragraph, in the way we still argue passionately about books, only to dissolve into laughter when we realize neither of us was really listening. It hasn't been a fairy tale. Not the sanitized, glittering kind. We've fought, God, how we've fought. Over his stubbornness, over my impulsiveness, over whose turn it was to do the dishes when we were both exhausted. There were nights I stormed out, slamming the door behind me, only to find him waiting on the porch steps an hour later, 2 mugs of tea steaming between his hands. There were mornings I woke up furious, only to have him disarm me with a single kiss pressed to the inside of my wrist. And the lovemaking, oh. If my youthful fantasies were sonnets, the reality has been an epic. Edwin didn't just meet my expectations, he unraveled them, rewrote them, left me breathless and trembling in ways I never imagined. The first time, in his bed, his mouth trailing fire down my spine as he whispered, "Tell me what you want," I realized then that I hadn't known my own desires until he drew them out of me, slow and sure, like a man deciphering a beloved text. But nothing, compared to the night he proposed. 6 months ago, he'd lured me back to my old classroom under some flimsy pretense. The dean wants to discuss your last reading here. When I stepped inside, the room was empty, except for him, standing at the lectern, wearing that damn tweed jacket I'd always loved. You once wrote a story about this moment, he'd said, voice rough. But I thought you deserved the real thing. Then he'd knelt. The ring glinted in the late afternoon light, but all I could see were his eyes, bright, unwavering, certain. My yes was barely a whisper before he surged up, catching me in his arms, his kiss tasting of salt and promises. Now, the stylist steps back, her smile soft. Ready? I rise, my gown whispering against my legs, and move toward the chapel. My father waits at the door, his eyes glistening as he takes my arm. The music swells. The doors open. And there, at the end of the aisle, Edwin stands, his gaze locking onto mine, his lips parting in a quiet, odd gasp. The fantasy was sweet. But the reality is everything. I take my first step toward him. Toward us. And this time, the story never ends.
This concludes our story. If you enjoyed this content, please consider hitting the subscribe button, like the video, and leave a comment below. Story AI generated and edited for consistency. AI voice by ClipChamp. Story generated using DeepSeek.